All right, today I'm going to talk to you about using wide-angle lenses on your SX70 camera. I've done previous posts where I've talked about using the portrait lens. This lens here that was made by Polaroid on this camera. I did comparisons between the portrait lens, non-lens. I even compared it with the i2 camera. I think the portrait lens is a great accessory for the camera. But what about wide-angle lenses? You know, the camera lens that's native with this camera is normal to just slightly wide. And it's a very good lens. But a lot of people, me included from time to time, will like to have a greater field of view, a greater ability to shoot in tight spaces. So there are really two great examples that work on this camera. The first one is made by Mint. Mint has made this particular lens for years. Literally, I bought it as soon as it came out. It's an interesting little setup. It has a bracket that mounts on the front of the camera like that. It literally just snaps on to the front of the camera. Pretty ingenious. And when you get the lens, it comes with additionally filters you can use, like a close-up filter, a blue filter, an orange filter, an ND filter. So it's kind of a nice set. And these lenses literally, if I can remember how to do this here, just lock on like that to the front. And this gives you a fisheye wide angle view. So it's really great, but it does have an awful lot of distortion with it. So the Mint lens has always been kind of a hit or miss. If you don't mind that distortion, or if you're doing types of photography where that type of distortion is cool, you know, you're photographing something a little more alternative, hey, it's great. But if you're looking for really clear, just wider angle, this isn't gonna cut it. So then recently, but it's also very light, which I like. Recently, I bought this setup. It's from Retrograde Engineer, and it has a bracket that looks like this. It's 3D printed. It has a 37mm ring on it, and it locks onto the camera exactly the same way. It has to be screwed onto the mount before you can attach it to the camera. So once again, just like on the Mint, it locks on both sides just like that. Now, I had a problem with their particular setup. I felt that it was a little tight right in here. A little tight where the lens was kind of pushing down on the front of the camera, and that's not good because you're changing the angle of those rollers and everything. So what I did is I took a little tiny nail file like this, and I sanded the very back edge of the lens right here. I think you can see just a little tiny bit. And I shaved off, I don't know, maybe a millimeter and a half of the metal. Now it fits on the camera and isn't pushing down on the door. I think the variability in that is in the 3D printing and this ring, the step-up ring that they have here that is glued into place. I can see where if it's not perfectly centered, that when they glue it in and screw it in, that it could be just enough to cause that angle to hit. So if anybody else has this lens, if you've had the same problem, let me know. I'm just kind of curious if it's a manufacturing issue or if it's just variability in the part. So what I did is I went in my kitchen where I did the post a day or two ago on the Zeiss Hologon Ultra Wide, and I went to about 4.5 feet, and I took a portrait of my wife. First, just with the camera using the native lens. And then I did a portrait where I was at 4.5 feet with the Mint, and then 4.5 feet with the Retrograde Engineer. So let's take a look at how those look. All right, the first shot I'm gonna show you is this one. This was just a portrait of Eve, 4.5 feet, focused on her glasses. Exposure is good, everything's good. And you feel that everything has a real nice natural feel to it. The background is sharp and clean, you know, just a nice little bit of out of focus rendering, and it's quite nice. The next one that I'm gonna show you is done with the Mint lens, which was this one here. And as you can see, there's a pretty big amount of distortion. But look at how much more we're getting in the frame. So in a 4.5 foot distance, you know, you're getting a lot more image, but you're also getting an awful lot of distortion. And I will tell you, it's not quite as sharp. The edges definitely are getting even softer than the center. It doesn't have the crisp feeling that the lens, that the traditional native lens on the Polaroid SX70 has. The third option was with the retrograde engineer lens, this one here, and it obviously is very distorted and very wide and sharp, but really kind of only in the middle. The outer edges definitely suffer from distortion and from softness. And if you look at these two side by side, I would really say it depends on what you want. There are times that I could see photographers wanting this extreme wide angle. There are times that I could see photographers wanting this type of wide angle. I've played with this the most, to be honest. This I don't quite love. I don't quite like how it mounts on the camera. I don't like the extra weight, and I don't like having to sand the lens down. So my take is still, I think the Mint, for what it provides, is kind of hard to beat for the dollar. And from an optical standpoint, neither one of these are what I would consider as sharp as the original Polaroid. And both of them, you're only talking a material that has 10 line per millimeter resolution to begin with, so you're never going to get that sharp anyways. Now, one thing that the retrograde engineer has that's kind of interesting is a really amazing macro capability. I believe it's like a 12x magnification, and it's really just this last part of the lens right here. So you unscrew the main portion of the lens from this part of the lens to get to the macro section. The problem that I have is that they have a tendency of really binding on each other, and I, at this current moment, can't get the two apart. But I did earlier, and I was able to take a macro shot, and it looks something like this. I'm focused literally just on this flower petal right here, and this is on a glass face. And you can see right now I'm showing the glass face with the picture, and you can see just how small of area it focuses. Now that to me is kind of cool. So while I'm not blown away by either one of the two lenses, whether the one by Mint or the one by retrograde engineering for the wide angle, as I said, I still like the Mint better. It's lighter, less weight on the camera, and I just like how it performs overall. If it was me shooting with this camera, I'm just gonna stick with their traditional SX70 lens or the portrait lens. I feel the other two are just an awful big compromise. Thank you very much for listening. Can't wait to hear your thoughts. Now go shoot some film. If I take the lens, it's a little bit stiff on mine, but if I take the lens,